Shalom. Before I begin, I'd like to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim Ruach Kodash. I'd like to say double honors to my teachers, the men whom I've learned this truth from, the apostles, bishops, and elders of Great Millstone. And I would also like to say shalom and salutations to the elect. I'm the brother Shaquat from the branch of Great Millstone, Montreal, back with another lesson, another in-transit lesson. And this lesson that I'm going to be getting into today is going to be going into pretty much how important it is to apply what you learn, because dealing with the scriptures, they, it says in the book of Ecclesiasticus, I don't know exactly where it is, I think it's 14, but it says how that, this truth, this wisdom is the doctrine of life, So when you deal with the scriptures, they basically, the fruit that comes out of, or the knowledge, the knowledge that you gain from the scriptures lead to life, lead to life. And wow, that's why Yahweh Shai said the kingdom of heaven is within you, and what's a part of being in the kingdom of heaven? It's immortality, so this wisdom, knowledge, and understanding that we have now is pretty much life. It's the kingdom, but the thing is, you just have to hold on to it. You just have to hang on to it until the end. Matter of fact, since seems the spirit has it going that way, let me get this real quick in the book of Mark. Wow, yeah, this is Mark 12, and I'm gonna start up. This is Mark 12 and verse 28. It says, "And one of the scribes came, and having heard them reasoning together, and perceiving that he had answered them well, asked him, which is the first commandment of all? And Yahushua answered him, the first of all the commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our power is one Lord." Right? And that's from the Lord quoted Deuteronomy 6, and that's a part of the Shemai prayer, right? Shemai, hear, Yashar Allah, Israel, Yahweh, the name of the Heavenly Father, Allah Hayin, our power, Yahweh Ahud is one, right? The Lord, hear, O Israel, the Lord Yahweh, our power, the Lord is one, right? That's that prayer in the Shemai prayer, right? It says, and Yahushua answered him, the first of all the commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our power is one Lord. So that's the first and most important commandment, is to understand and to ingest in your mind that the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, is one Lord. There's only one power, there's only one God, and that is Yahweh, the Supreme, right? And he's only to be worshipped, and you're to worship him with all thy spirit, with all thy soul, right? Verse 30, it says, and thou shalt love the Lord thy power, Yahweh, with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment, right? Verse 31, and the second is like, namely this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these. Hold on. If you're paying attention, Yahushua basically, he only mentioned 2 commandments. The first, which is the most important one, is to fear the Lord Yahweh and reverence and respect him with all thy soul, mind, and your strength. And then he said the second is like it, which is to love your neighbor as yourself. Why didn't Yahweh Shai say, thou shalt not eat, you shouldn't eat pork, swine's flesh? Or why didn't he say, thou shalt not covet, or thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness? There's a reason to that, right? Because when you're looking at it, the law, statutes, and commandments, right? There is, like, the elders always go into, right? Like my teachers, the apostles, bishops, and elders, they always go into. There's a mindset that the laws, statutes, and commandments, like, the ones that were given Moses, there's a mindset that it concludes, that it comes to, and Yahushua just gave you a summary of what that mindset is, right? Loving the Lord, having a fear of the Lord, because when you fear the Lord, you abstain from doing particular things, right? And when you understand that there's only one God, you're not going to praise any other God. You're going to fear, worshiping idols. You're going to fear doing things that the Heavenly Father doesn't approve of, right? And then secondly, loving your neighbor as yourself. If you love your neighbor as yourself, if you respect another Israelite as yourself, you treat him like yourself, you avoid a lot of things. You avoid stealing from him because you wouldn't want to be stolen from, right? So that's that mindset, right? You avoid sleeping with his wife because you wouldn't want him to sleep with your wife. So you treat him as you would treat yourself, right? That basically sums up the law, statutes, and commandments. Loving the Lord, Yahweh, and loving your brother as yourself. So that's basically the mindset that the law, statutes, and commandments 613 sums up to. And that's also what Yahushua said. Upon these hang all the law. Loving Yahweh as yourself, and treating your neighbor as thyself. No, loving Yahweh with all your body, mind, and soul, Salakia, and then basically treating your brother as yourself. Right? So let's keep going on. Verse 32. And the scribe said unto him, well, Master, thou hast said the truth, for there is one power, and there is none other but he. And to love him with all the heart, and with all the understanding, and with all the soul, and with all the strength, and to love his neighbor as himself is more than all whole burnt offerings and sacrifices. Right? So he understood, the scribe understood that. He understood what Yahushua was saying. How Yahushua pretty much summed the law, statutes, and commandments to two things. He narrowed it down to that mindset, to loving the Lord and fearing the Lord, Yahweh, and then and serving him with all thy heart, and understanding that there's only one power, and treating your brother as yourself. This scribe understood that. Verse 34 says, and when Yahushua saw that he answered discreetly, meaning wisely, right? He answered smartly. He said unto him, thou art not far from the kingdom of Yahweh. So, right, it says, and no man after that durst ask him any question. Damn. So Yahushua said, yo, you basically got it. You understand the gist of it. That's what he told the scribe, and if it was in today's terminology, you understand the gist of it. You basically got the kingdom. It says, thou art not far from the kingdom. Why is he not far? Because that mindset, if he continues to have that mindset of loving the Lord Yahweh with all your heart, body, and mind, and strength, and understanding that there's only one power, which is Yahweh, and is serving your brother as yourself, if you have that mindset until Yahushua returns, man, you're pretty much, you're good, you're golden, you'll get to the kingdom. That's what Yahushua said. That's why he said, thou art not far from the kingdom, because you just have to hold on. You have to hold on to that mindset, right? So yeah, the spirit had this lesson go a whole nother way, but that's the spirit, right? You can't really control it, so I'm gonna end the lesson there. I want to say, Kal Halayim La Yahweh Bahashem Yahushai Bahashem Raha Kodash like to say double honors to my teachers, the apostles, the bishops, and elders of Great Millstone, the men whom I've learned this truth from. And I'd also like to say shalom and salutations to the elect that's out there. Until next time, shalom.